This video delves into the infamous My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War, where American soldiers executed hundreds of innocent Vietnamese civilians. The soldiers received vague orders to attack the village, believing it to be a Viet Cong stronghold. They proceeded to brutally kill men, women, and children, and the official report attempted to cover up the civilian deaths. The actions of soldiers Hugh Thompson Jr., Lawrence Colburn, and Glenn Andreatta, who tried to save civilians, were initially ignored but later recognized. The trial of William Calley, the only person charged, resulted in a controversial sentence and a subsequent pardon. The My Lai massacre revealed the capacity for atrocities by the U.S. military and raised questions about the overall conduct of the war. In this section, the excerpt discusses the infamous My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War in March 1968. Task Force Barker, consisting of soldiers from B and C companies, was ordered to attack the village of My Lai, believing it to be a Viet Cong hotspot. Captain Ernest Medina informed his soldiers that everyone remaining in the village would be considered an enemy, including the civilian population. The soldiers were given vague instructions, and some claimed they were told to kill any combatants or suspected combatants, even women and children. On the morning of March 16, artillery and helicopter insertions led to the massacre of hundreds of innocent civilians, including women and children. In this section, the transcript excerpt describes a horrific massacre committed by American soldiers during the Vietnam War. The soldiers engaged 4 suspected combatants, but instead of encountering any fighters, they mercilessly massacred innocent civilians. The soldiers stabbed, shot, burned, and grenaded anyone they came across, including women and children. However, there were 3 soldiers who showed bravery and humanity. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., Specialist Lawrence Colburn, and Specialist Glenn Andreatta attempted to intervene and save the civilians. They radioed for help, launched smoke grenades, and even landed their helicopter between the soldiers and a bunker full of civilians. They managed to save around a dozen civilians by evacuating them themselves. In this section, the transcript describes the aftermath of the My Lai massacre and the attempts to cover up the civilian deaths by the U.S. military. The official report from Task Force Barker claimed that they had killed 128 VC soldiers, completely omitting any mention of civilian casualties. Despite soldiers from C Company boasting about their execution of hundreds of civilians, an initial investigation concluded that 20 civilians had inadvertently been killed. Specialist Ron Ridenour brought attention to the massacre and wrote letters exposing it to President Nixon, the Pentagon, and congressmen, but received no public response. It wasn't until journalist Seymour Hersh published an article exposing the massacre and the military's prosecution of Lieutenant Kelly that the truth came to light. The revelations shattered public confidence in the war, but some still believe the story was fabricated. A proper investigation led by Lieutenant General William Pierce found that at least 200 civilians had been killed, and several soldiers were charged, but only a small fraction of those involved faced trial. In this section, we learn about the aftermath of the My Lai massacre and the reactions to the trial of William Calley, the only person charged in relation to the incident. Calley, who showed no remorse and claimed he was just following orders, received a life sentence, but public opinion was divided. President Nixon later intervened, changing Calley's sentence to house arrest, and in 1974 he was given a full pardon after serving only 3.5 years. In contrast, the heroic actions of Thompson, Colburn, and Riata, who tried to stop the massacre, were initially ignored. Years later, they were recognized and awarded the Soldier's Medal. The My Lai massacre highlighted the capability of the US to commit atrocities and raised questions about the wider attitudes of the war. It also leaves us wondering what other untold events occurred during the Vietnam War.